On the 13th of April 2026, Mark Carney won something Donald Trump has spent 15 months trying to prevent. Not just an election, a majority. A parliamentary lock on power until at least 2029, secured through 3 by-elections in Ontario and Quebec, and 5 opposition politicians who, one by one, walked across the floor of Parliament and joined the Prime Minister. Trump has been trying to break. 15 months ago, Carney's Liberal Party was 27 points behind in the polls. The party looked finished. Justin Trudeau had just resigned under sustained pressure from his own caucus, and the man positioned to replace him as Prime Minister was Pierre Poilievre, a 4-5-year-old career politician who had held his seat since 2004, built a Canada First coalition, and was running a campaign that looked structurally almost identical to the one that put Trump back in the White House. Tonight, Poilievre doesn't have a seat in Parliament, and Carney has a majority. That is one of the most dramatic reversals in the political history of any democracy in the world. And understanding how it happened, the specific sequence of decisions, the specific people involved, the specific moments where the story turned is not just a Canadian story. It is a documented case study in what happens when a country builds a democratic institutional response to Trumpism, executes it methodically, and then wins. Let's start with who Mark Carney actually is, because the mainstream coverage glosses over the part of his biography that explains everything. Carney was never a politician. He was a central banker. He ran the Bank of Canada from 2008 to 2013, which means he was the person steering Canada's economy through the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. Then the British government asked him to run the Bank of England, which he did from 2013 to 2020, which means he was the person managing one of the world's most complex financial institutions through the chaos of Brexit. He chaired Brookfield Asset Management. He has spent his entire career doing one thing: walking into rooms where the situation was deteriorating rapidly and stabilizing it. When Trudeau resigned and the Liberal Party needed a new leader, Carney won that contest with more than 85% of the party vote. Not because Liberals loved him as a political figure, he had never run for office in his life, but because Canada was staring down 25% U.S. tariffs on its exports. Donald Trump was publicly suggesting Canada should become the 51st state, and Liberals understood that the person they needed was not a communicator or a retail politician. They needed someone who had actually managed crises of this magnitude before. Carney himself said it plainly on the campaign trail. When things are good, you probably don't want me. It's when things are in a state of crisis that I'm at my best. That framing was deliberate, and it worked. Now, here is the thing about Pierre Poilievre that the surface coverage misses entirely. Poilievre was not a weak candidate. He was, by almost any objective measure, an exceptionally strong one. He had held his Ottawa area seat of Carleton for 21 years. He had built a genuine populist coalition, fiscally conservative, culturally combative, anti-elite in the way that resonated. His 2 7-point polling lead over the Liberals wasn't an accident. It was the product of a real movement built over years that genuinely reflected a large segment of Canadian political sentiment. The problem for Poilievre was not that his politics were wrong. The problem was that Donald Trump showed up and made Poilievre's politics structurally impossible to run on. Think about the specific bind Poilievre found himself in. His platform and his rhetoric, smaller government, tighter borders, anti-woke cultural messaging, Canada First, those positions didn't just resemble Trump's. They were philosophically aligned with them, which meant that when Trump started threatening to annex Canada, slapping 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, and posting on social media on the morning of the Canadian election, urging voters to make Canada the 51st state, Poilievre was caught. He couldn't credibly run against Trump without abandoning the ideological framework his entire coalition was built on. And he couldn't run with Trump without committing political suicide in a country that was watching its sovereignty get challenged in real time. His response, Canada First, stand on our own 2 feet, stand up to America from a position of strength, was not incoherent. But it was too late, and too similar to language that his opponent was using more convincingly, with more credibility, and with a cleaner biography. On the 28th of April, 2025, Canadian Election Day, Trump posted on social media telling Canadians to, in his words, elect the man who would cut their taxes, quadruple their industries, and make Canada the cherished 51st state. He appeared to be referring to himself. It was one of the most extraordinary acts of foreign interference in a democratic election in recent memory, and it happened in broad daylight. Carney won that night. He carried 169 seats to Poilievre's 144. He won the popular vote with the highest Liberal share since 1980. And Poilievre lost his own seat, the riding of Carleton, which he had held since 2004 to a first-term Liberal challenger named Bruce Fanjoy. Let that land for a second. The man who had been 27 points ahead in the polls lost not just the election, but his own parliamentary seat. The last Conservative leader to lose their seat was Kim Campbell in 1993. The last time the Liberals won the popular vote with that kind of share was the year Ronald Reagan was elected President of the United States. But here is what Carney did not have on election night 2025. A majority. He had 169 seats, a majority in Canada's 343 seat. House of Commons requires 172. He was 3 seats short, which meant he was leading a minority government, one that needed opposition support to pass legislation, one that could fall on a confidence vote at any moment, one that gave his opponents leverage to stall, delay, and complicate every piece of his agenda. For the first year of his government, that constraint was real. Fewer than half of the bills his government introduced became law. He needed the Bloc Québécois, the NDP, or at least some cooperative Conservatives to move anything significant. And that constraint mattered enormously in the context of what was coming, a trade negotiation with Donald Trump that would define Canada's economic relationship with its largest trading partner for a generation. Carney needed a freer hand. And over the next 12 months, he got one through a sequence of events that has almost no precedent in Canadian parliamentary history. 5 opposition politicians. 5 months. One by one, they crossed the floor of Parliament and joined Mark Carney's Liberals. The first thing to understand about floor crossings defections, in plain language, is that they are not common in Canadian politics. They happen, but 5 in 5 months, all flowing in the same direction toward the same government, that is a different kind of signal. Only 2 governments in Canadian history have seen more defections to the ruling party. John A. Macdonald's in 1869 and Jean Chrétien's. Macdonald was Canada's first prime minister. Chrétien governed during one of the most economically prosperous stretches in the country's modern history. Carney's defection total is being built in the middle of a trade war. The most telling of the 5 was Marilyn Gladu. Gladu was not a peripheral figure in the Conservative Party. She was a long-standing member, a former chemical engineer, a recognizable voice on the right. When she switched parties on the 8th of April 2026, she didn't offer a vague statement about personal principles. She said explicitly, Canada needs a serious leader who can address the uncertainty that has arrived due to the unjustified American tariffs. That sentence is important because Gladu is not a liberal. She has, in the past, opposed a ban on conversion therapy. She has drawn criticism for promoting unproven COVID treatments. She suggested using the military to end Indigenous-led pipeline protests. She is not someone who woke up one morning and decided she was a progressive. She made a calculation, a specific, named, stated calculation that on the defining issue of this political moment, Carney was the competent choice and her own party was not. When she crossed, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre accused Carney of seizing a costly Liberal majority that voters denied him through backroom deals. That is a real political critique. The voters of Gladu's riding elected a Conservative. They did not vote for a Liberal government. Floor crossings are legal in Canada, but they are not without democratic tension, and Poilievre's objection is not frivolous. But here is the political reality Poilievre is living inside right now. He survived a leadership review in January 2026, meaning his own party had a formal vote on whether to keep him, and chose to, but barely. His polling numbers sit at 22.9% preferred prime minister against Carney's 54.5%. He leads a caucus that has been hemorrhaging members to the government he is supposed to be opposing. And the argument that Carney's majority is illegitimate, that it was bought, not won, has a ceiling, because the voters of University Rosedale just gave Carney's candidate 65% of the vote. The voters of Scarborough Southwest just delivered 70%. Those are not close races. Those are landslides. In ridings that voted Liberal before, yes, but by margins that exceed what the Liberals posted in those same ridings at the general election. The direction of travel, as of the 13th of April 2026, is unambiguous. So what does Carney actually have now that he didn't have last April? The most important thing is this. He cannot be removed from power by a no-confidence vote anytime soon. Under a minority government, any bad week, a budget dispute, a coalition partner threatening to walk, an unexpected scandal creates a potential election trigger. Minority governments in Canada typically last less than 2 years. Carney now controls